We're back with the legendary creator, Norman Lear. Podcast, All the Above with Norman Lear, Mondays on Podcast One and iTunes, and leave a nice review and 5 stars and watch it climb the charts. Gerard Carmichael, Julie Louise Dreyfus, and Kevin Bacon. There's an easy one. All recent guests. Norman's been in here before. I've seen him over at Phil's many times. A dear, dear man. And also watched...
Everybody knows who Phil is.
Everyone knows Phil.
On this show.
Rosenthal, yes. And we're good, smart, but we've talked about Rosenthal a lot, and he comes in a lot. Yeah. And obviously, creator All in the Family, Sanford and Son, The Jeffersons, Good Times. It just keeps going and going and going. Produced films.
It's going right now.
It's going now. Oh, I forgot. Produced films like Stand By Me and Spinal Tap, Princess Bride. Some of my favorite movies.
A laundry list.
Ever.
Yeah. I watched you on the doc last night.
Inconceivable!
If you're not in the obits, Eat Breakfast and Get On With It on HBO. So I was watching you, and Dick Van Dyke is amazing.
How about it? He just did Poppins 2.
Mary Poppins 2,
and they couldn't get over the fact they had all kinds of preparation to get him ready to dance and think he was going to dance like an old man. He danced like he did when he was a kid.
He's so fluid, and it's one thing to see once in a while. They got the old guy, and he can deadlift 300 pounds or something, but that's a little bit different. It looks like an old guy just deadlifting.
It's not coordinated.
Whatever.
Movement.
He's moving fluidly and brilliantly.
We were talking about earlier, like you were saying that you got to kind of keep using it to stay sharp. Like I was thinking about Bobby Bowden, the football coach, Florida State, won a conference championship at age 75, and my grandma at that point had to go through like a list of names to get to mine. She's like, hey, Judy, what the hell's your name? Like, she didn't obviously coach a football team every day.
Well, how much of this, now I'm starting to think, is about using it or losing it, about getting up. They featured you going into work, reading scripts.
The culture has it all crazed and wrong the way they do about a lot of things. Aging and age itself and so forth. And I think it had my generation believing it all. And it's bullshit.
Yeah, no, well, we did a couple of things that were horrible, and I've always sort of joked about it, but I sort of mean it, which is we decided old people were jokes and not useful and stuff like
Grandpa.
that. Right. Hey, your Depends is all full, Grandpa. And I've always joked, but I do mean it when I go, look, if you're going to make fun of somebody you're not going to turn into. Meaning Puerto Ricans, I'm never going to be a Puerto Rican, so I should make Puerto Rican jokes. But old man jokes I shouldn't make because I should hope to become an old man.
Yes, it's what you're dedicated to do.
I wake up every morning with a intent of getting closer to old. So maybe we've turned the corner a little bit. I feel like there's more reverence coming toward folks that are 80
that
plus.
That could be
or
because
something.
When I turned 90, I am turning 95 shortly. When I turned 90, I started to get applause standing up. And crossing a room, I think I said it in the film, crossing a room could get me an ovation.
Well, there's a couple of things that stood out in my interview of you in the past, which I really, and I'll have you know this, I don't repeat a lot of what other people say because I have my own stuff that I say and I like to do my stuff. But when you said to me, you're a lot different at the time, a lot different from 87 to 91, that stuck with me like nothing else has stuck with me in the last decade of talking to really interesting, notable luminaries. First off, it made me happy. I was like, yeah, why can't you? I do feel different at 53 than I was at 45. Like, I feel like I know more. I feel like I think about other things. I feel more.
It makes sense.
More whatever. It makes sense. But why is there some sort of cutoff when you turn 80? You have to think about not progressing.
Well, that's where the mistake has been made. There is no cutoff.
Right.
There is no cutoff. There isn't a day that goes by when I don't have... I mean, I've had a couple of little insights about my life that wouldn't make a lot of sense, perhaps, to other people. It's just important to me that that compare with insights I had when I was 27.
Right.
I mean, that important.
Right.
Holy, where has this been?
It came out at 93.
At 93, yes. It came out 6 weeks ago.
I love that we can, God willing, look forward to that, but also I'm happy that these kinds of documentaries, I don't know if they would have been shown on HBO 10 years ago. I don't. They would have said, "Oh, come on, it's a bunch of old guys. We want to do something about some, young pop singer cut down in his prime, whatever, or something with Al Qaeda or something." This is it's really inspiring, and it's Mel Brooks and all the Carl Reiner and a lot of the usual. But
you remember the woman doing push-ups at 103?
Yeah, she had this great story, which is both her sons died within about 2.5 years, got involved with drugs, got murdered, and I think she was 67, may have been 61 at the time, and she was just mourning and spiraling into this sort of horrible depression, and her daughter just said, "You got to get out and get moving." And I've said it to a million people, and it drives me nuts when they're like, "All right, you don't know what you're talking about." Like, I was like, start walking, start moving, start listening to classical music, just get out.
Okay, thanks, doctor. It sounds great.
Physically start moving.
That's
and
your prescription?
Because they say, "I'm depressed. What do I do?" And they start talking about getting checkups and meds and psychiatrists and pills and regimens. And I'm like, get up and go for a walk and put some good classical on and just start sweating. Just start moving. I bet it'll go away.
Okay, but right now you're blocking the TV.
It couldn't hoit, as the old joke used to go. Yes,
Mr. Lear, I love the idea that you're still learning stuff. If there's something that comes to mind, maybe in the last month or few months or whatever, what's a revelation or some lesson or something that you've come to realize, like, oh, that's something I didn't know. You're still learning at this point. I don't know if something comes to mind. But it'd be interesting.
Well, here's something that came to mind recently. I've not articulated it before, so I don't know how much sense it's going to make. But I wanted to do a spiritual talk show. I'm going back 25, 30 years. Late night, 11 o'clock at night, people are on the show. They're not going to talk about their book. They're not going to talk about their play, their movie. They're going to talk about what gets them through the day, what gets them through the night, their spiritual life, And we dare to talk about God and such. I never knew who should host it until I met Maya Angelou. This is a great many years ago. And we talked about doing it anyway to try to make this short.
So we got time.
2 years running. First year, we were like 10 weeks out when she said, she didn't say she couldn't do it. She wasn't ready, whatever. The second year, we were already, I just lost his name, the orchestra leader, who gave up a trip to Japan to stay in town to do this. We had a house for her above the Strip, and we had producers. We had a great team, and we were all ready to go. In like 7, 8 days, 10 days out, she couldn't do it. Now, I have had a lot of years to think about it. It's only within the last 10 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, things happened in my life, other things nudged other things, and I gained an insight that I never had before, would not have had other things not occurred. And I realized Maya was never going to do it. It wasn't her thing to work, 5 days a week at 11 o'clock at night. It was, and I didn't have a piece of paper from her. I never had a letter from her or a call or anything else with ideas to prove my point.
Right.
That it wasn't. She never said. She just gave herself all the way, and this was the insight. I kind of talked her into thinking this could happen. And the big part of the insight was this is something I wanted to do.
Right.
And I had prevented myself all those years from tackling what I should have done out of my own fears or realization that I wasn't the right casting or whatever. But it was something I never knew that before.
It's got to be interesting for you because you're a creator and producer and so much work behind the camera, but then you realize you can go in front of the camera. You have a voice. You have something to say. You're charismatic. So, but now, do you feel in a weird way like you're under more scrutiny because of all the creating you've done behind the cameras, and now you're pushing yourself up in front of the camera? You think that was part of it?
No, and what's wrong with scrutiny?
That's a good point. Most people don't like it.
Stencil that on
This
the
is
pillow.
your TED Talk right
Yeah.
now.
There is a good, there's the great word, which is scrutineering. We were talking about the Le Mans race, and before the race, all the cars have to pass through scrutineering.
Ooh, the scrutineers,
They
like
have
the
to
Mickey
make
Mouse
sure
Club.
that they pass all the rules and all the laws and all the things they have for the race cars. Scrutineering.
Yes.
Like that.
What do you do? I'm a scrutineer.
I'm a scrutineer.
I like that.
By the way, your fly's open. I'm off, but I work.
It took a scrutineer to say that.
That was pro bono. Speaking of bono, fly's still open. Thank you. I should write a show. All right, let's get ready. I got a question.
I got an answer.
Oh, good, because one of the other things that most fascinated me about Norman Lear is his relationship with his mom. And I love his relationship with his mom. Sadly, I mirror yours, although I have not had the success you've had. But many senses there are lots of similarities, parallels and
She's
similarities.
121. She lives in Glendale.
I'll tell you first, then we'll talk about Norman's mom, which I love. Smart Mouth, dual solution oral rinse, only activated mouthwash, clinically proven to instantly eliminate bad breath and prevent it from coming back for 12 full hours. Zinc ion technology binds to bacteria, forcing it to stop producing sulfur gas. This is technology. Drew knows all about how this works. He's a big fan. Well, he loves science. Nothing ruins an intimate moment as quickly as stinky breath. Doesn't matter what you do all day. At the end of it, your mouth smells like wet garbage. That is a deal breaker. Foul breath can ruin social situations, sabotage relationships, or career prospects. You don't want someone scrutineering over your halitosis, do you? Visit smartmouth.com, or you want to just pick it up. Go to Walmart, Target, Walgreens, CVS, wherever you like to shop, but it's easy. Smartmouth.com. Mix the two solutions together and get the heavy-duty stuff at Smart Mouth. So Norman was telling me about his mom, and that made me laugh because it reminds me of my mom. I just to catch you up quickly, comically, on my mom is still alive. So Jimmy's basically my best friend, and he hosted the Oscars, and I wrote on the Oscars this year, and I had a great time with Jimmy. And when my wife asked my mom if she watched it, she said, in and out, parts of it. And then she said, what did you think? And my mom said, it's okay. And then we moved on to talking about offerings from Trader Joe's in their cheese department for the next 37 minutes. And I thought, I may always think about you when I think about this. And now your mom, no matter how much success you had, just never gave it up, right?
Never gave it up. I don't think the only thing I ever heard, she raved about me to other people, and she enjoyed doing that when I was around. I've never heard anything from her directly.
But isn't that its own? That's its own form of narcissism. That's just her.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Look what I have.
Doing
I
that.
did the Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis. We did the first hours of the Colgate Camera Hour together. So I was their first writer, basically. And I would call my mother instantly when the show was going. The final credits were still running, and I'd call 68 Woodstock Street, Hartford, Connecticut. My mother and my dad would pick up the phone. My mother, Mom, do you see the show? Yes, sweetheart. How did the boys like it? Meaning Dean and Jerry.
Right.
Well, they're still in front of the camera, and they seem to have loved it. I think. How did you like it? Well, we saw it.
Right. It's a weird thing. Like when they want to know, like, yeah, my mom's version of a compliment is like, you didn't seem nervous. But that's not really a compliment. That's, you didn't do something.
Based on observation.
Started on time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The story that you, I think, remember the most was I called my mother. I get a call on a Sunday from the guy who was running MacArthur, John something. Despite my forgetting it all those years ago, a great friend who called me on a Sunday to tell me that they had a meeting all day yesterday, the Television Academy of Arts and Sciences, and they're going to start a Hall of Fame. Norman, these are the first inductees. Bill Paley, who invented CBS, David Sarnoff, General David Sarnoff, who did NBC, Patty Chayefsky, Edward R. Murrow, the greatest of the foreign correspondents, Milton Berle, Lucille Ball, and you. I call my mother again instantly. Bridgeport, Connecticut. Now my dad's passed. She's married to another guy. Mom, they're starting a Hall of Fame at the Academy, and these are the first inductees, and I rattle off all of them. And me. She says, listen, if that's what they want to do, who am I to say?
Oh, my God.
That's good.
We got to get my mom together with her urn.
You know what that is? It's judo.
Oh,
big time.
Yeah, it's the judo. It's the age. It's my grandfather's did. It takes your own personal
jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu. Yeah, it takes your personal momentum and uses it to stuff you into the mat. Yeah. Wow. And you told me another great story about inviting your mom out to your place. Yeah. Like you had a Hollywood party with lots of luminaries.
No, it was that night. Well, she came out for a week, and so she saw a lot of things. And but she came out for the awards. I mean, for the installation in the Hall of Fame, or whatever that evening was. And are you talking about the on the plane?
Yeah, the plane. Yes,
the plane. So I send a car and a driver to pick her up in Bridgeport, bring her to the airport. I'm standing on the sidewalk waiting for her. She has a wheelchair. I don't have anybody pushing it but me. I push her up. We get on the plane. She's sitting on the aisle, so she has easier access to the aisle. And as she's told me as I'm wheeling her up, she's got a new doctor, a new eye, ear, and throat guy, and he's got her some nose drops, and she thinks eye drops. And she thinks they're just wonderful. And we get on the plane. The plane is in the air for 20 minutes. A guy is walking down the aisle. She reaches out and she pulls his sleeve, and she says, "Sir, could you help me?" She's fishing in her pocketbook. "My doctor gave me these eye drops. Could you put 2 in this eye for me? I have to take it every 4 hours." And certainly. And I'm 62 or so years old. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at her. And the guy puts the drops in, and she thanks him, and she's putting it back, and she does a double, triple take, looking at me, looking at her.
Right.
And she says, "What? What?" And I said, "You asked a stranger to put drops in your eyes. I'm your son. I'm sitting right here. What? Why not me?" She said, "You have to be very careful." I said, "Mom, what makes you think I can't be careful?" She said, "And patient." "What makes you think I can't?" Look at that. Right. Some patience.
She's a master.
She is.
There's a weird theme, and I, as you tell these stories, I can feel it with my mom and my grandma. It's this weird thing of incompetence, but for your own.
Right.
So it's like a weird,
which doesn't serve you either.
When I was at some point when I was a master carpenter, and I am a very good carpenter, they had this neighbor who was a Hungarian guy named Lazar, who was a hack. Like, I would walk in, and it's like, who put the wall mount air conditioner in the wall? Like, Lazar did. Well, it's sideways. Like, it was like, I could see before I walked in a room his molding, like, going off like a ski slope, and stuff like that. And I remember I'd have these conversations with my grandma, and she'd be like, "Lazar said it should be a coping joint, not a miter joint." I'm like, Lazar's a hack. I'm a journeyman carpenter, or I'm your grandson. Like, why would you trust me? Lazar says not to use a line level, use a string level. Like, it was all this but he was a crazy Hungarian guy. He was a hack carpenter. But somehow,
because it wasn't you, it was better.
Yes, I remember once, famously, is when my grandmother was trying to explain it wasn't clitoris. It was clitoris.
Oh, God.
It's my favorite conversation I got into with my grandmother. You're saying clitoris. It's clitoris. And I said, Dr. Drew says it's clitoris. Hank Gale is a doctor. And he said, and I said, yeah, Dr. Drew's a doctor, but that's my doctor. That's the doctor I know. So he's not a doctor. Like, he's gone. Like, it's such it's a bizarre thing to downgrade your own that way, or some need to. It's palpable. I understand it like very well. Like I can feel it.
I think it's the kind of an ultimate degree of narcissism.
Yeah,
you know, she can only see herself as clearly as.
But why you sprung from her loins? Why then are you not kissed into this narcissistic tent?
Sprung from her loins reminds me. I'm an infant. This is a famous story in our family. For all the years I was growing up, it was told 150 times. My mother used to tell the story often about she's bathing me in the sink. I'm 2.5 months old or something. She's bathing me in the sink, and I slip out of her hands. And she runs next door to the neighbor to get the neighbor, and the neighbor comes in and says, Mother, I slipped in the water. And you ran out of the room?
Right.
But why didn't you just... I was so frightened. The story was about her fright, not about my drowning.
Right.
About her fright. I was so frightened, I had to get Alice next door. It says it all. I mean, I don't know how you could deliver a story that shows more narcissism.
Bill Shatner just sent me a text. He wants to know what the big deal is. It's a little inside pool humor there. That's a deep pull.
But isn't that sort of the quote unquote job of everyone around a narcissist? Is, oh, you're my son. Okay, here's your mirror. Hold it up so I can see myself. And if you don't do that, we're going to have problems.
Well said.
Now, here's the bigger question. Oh, well, two things. Obviously, you're aware of this, but you were picking up the phone and calling her after the Colgate Comedy Hour and that kind of stuff. Now, at a certain point, you should know that you're going to smack this handball against her curtain and it's just going to fall to the ground. It's never going to come back at you and give you a spirited game of handball. Why the impulse? I know why, she's your mother, but at a certain point and with enough therapy, don't you just not pick up that phone at a certain point?
I don't think I had enough therapy till I was 76 or something. I don't know. I was in the service. I served overseas. I wrote my mother often. I might not have remembered that at all, except after the war, I saw she had these letters. I could not believe the love letters I wrote my mother. But I mean love letters, like it could have been I was writing to a young wife.
So you read them how long after your return?
Writing to a wife. I want to take that back. But they were love letters.
No, but I get it. They're affectionate.
They were full of affection. And typical of my mother, 2 years later it occurred to me, I want to hold these. I want to have these. And I asked my mother for them. She said, oh, they're gone. I said, what do you mean they're gone? She said, you saw them, that was all.
Wow.
And she had thrown them away.
Like the scene in Goodfellas. They're gone. There's nothing we can do about it.
Nothing we can do about it. The one thing that I feel like we squander is, as human beings, separated from all the other species on the planet, is we get to change. We get to grow. We get to develop. And it never ends. The body starts falling apart at some point, but we get to keep evolving, and we squander this opportunity. So many people are locked into some adolescent reptilian version of themselves, and they just take it to the grave. And the fact that you're sitting here at age 92 and you're saying, what? You're saying 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been, emotionally open to something. Well, the notion of 5 years ago of being 87 and a bunch of growth happening between 87 and 92, and then you said 12 years before that. So when you were just 80, is something that I want people to hear. I want people to experience that.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I want to articulate it as boldly, loudly as I can. There are two journeys we're on, as I look at it. One is a horizontal journey. So you're a doctor and you learn more about this or that or the other thing, or you're a lawyer and you keep learning more on a horizontal level. And then there's a vertical journey, and that's entirely into yourself. And it's, of the two journeys, it's significantly longer and deeper and more enjoyable. I mean, it's the journey of journeys.
I agree, but why, as a society, do you feel like we treat it like it was, I don't know, about as important as the space-saving spare tire that's floating around in the trunk of your car? Why do we give it such little attention? I mean, as a society, when I say to people, this is the most important thing you can do, is to really focus on your shortcomings, focus on your strengths, but focus on your weaknesses. Keep evolving, keep getting better, keep growing. Why, as a society, have we built this incredible structure around sort of not fostering that?
Because we don't live in a society that encourages this conversation. You would think this conversation would be encouraged in churches and synagogues and mosques and so forth. But in those places of a Sunday morning or whatever day there's, they are...
the Sabbath is, yes, their Sabbath.
It's... The priest, the rabbi, is sitting there with the power to say anything and says, come back next Sunday and we'll go over it some more.
Right.
He doesn't say go home and have this conversation, sit around your table, it's the best conversation going, dig deeper, ask the questions. Nobody in leadership in our culture encourages us to have this conversation.
No, and neither does Madison Avenue, but...
Well, especially neither does Madison
I've
Avenue.
always said, the president can go to church and have his clergy and, do that whole thing. And as a matter of fact, he needs to be seen leaving church on Sunday. I would like the president to be seen leaving his therapist's office. And yet everyone would say, well, that's insanity because he'd never get elected for a second term. But I said, that's what I want. I want the message to be sent that we talk about economics and we talk about the borders and we talk about acid rain and we talk about climate change, but we never talk about this. And this takes care of all of that. All of the stuff that prison overcrowding, violent crime, crimes against women, crimes against children, ethnic cleansing, whatever it is we're talking about that we don't like as a culture or a society or a civilization can be virtually erased if we would just turn the conversation toward this. And in terms of personal growth, in terms of success, all the discussion about, education, all the discussion about, nose to the grindstone, all this, you could have so much more success with this conversation versus the endless conversation about education, which of course is important, but this is the conversation that's always left out of education.
And left out of religion.
Completely. Religion was created to remove this conversation from our collective vocabulary. So we don't have to have this. We have a book with this conversation in it, and someone already had it. That's what religion is for. And we don't have to deal with this conversation because this conversation is difficult at times, and it also makes you go to places that you may not want to go to, but it also forces you to internalize a lot of things that are going wrong in your life versus pointing at the government or pointing at the guy across the street or pointing at your wife or husband or
and
child.
causing you to face truth.
Right.
See, I had hoped when Obama was running, it didn't matter that he was as young as he is. The country always needs a father. People.
Right.
We need that, the father. It could be a mother. I'm thinking father because that's the image. But somebody who helps us, who causes us to think about this and talk about this. Because can you imagine if there are 3 other people here that enjoyed the kind of conversation we're having and they were pitching in what other places we might go?
Yes. I've always been amazed at how little, you think about all the discussions we have about our bodies, all the books written on diets, all the instructional workout videos, the gym that's on every corner.
Right.
And yet this part we're talking about, the strength of our mind, our consciousness, our ability to reflect honestly on our lives and grow, even if it's from 85 to 92. Personally, I just turned 50 and I feel like my 50th year has been my best year. I've made movies and documentaries and done more interesting things and had more experiences and more thoughts and more breakthroughs and more experiences, good and bad, than I had when I turned 40 or 30. And why shouldn't it just keep going? And it used to be called wisdom, and we used to cherish it. And we talk to the elders and say, you've been here. We want to hear what you have to say. And now we say, get out of here, Grandpa.
You were born an elder. You've been an elder for a little while.
Well, do you feel like, Norman?
It has nothing to do with age.
Well, but do you feel, people talk old soul.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the fact that you felt, and I feel the same way, that I was on my own from the word go, or close to the word go? Like I looked around and went, I'm going to have to take care of myself here. No one's going to step in.
Right.
Someone may give me some food or something, but as it pertains to life,
you're on your own.
You're on your own. So get used to it and get cracking. Is that how you felt growing up?
When you ask the question, that suggests that I might have thought about it. And I don't recall thinking about it. But
no, I don't mean you thought about it. I didn't think about it. You just reacted to it.
I behaved that way. When I was in that 9th year, my father was away, and I'm in Woodmont, Connecticut that summer. And I say the summer that I saw my mother for an instant, there was a big storm, huge storm. And everybody lost clothespins. And I was in New Haven some days later with 2 pillowcases at a clothespin manufacturer, filling my pillowcases, came back and sold them 3 for a nickel or whatever the hell I was selling them for. I was doing things like that.
Right.
And I was a kid. So I have those memories to suggest I was doing exactly what you say. But was I thinking about it and doing it as a matter of forethought? I don't remember that.
No, I probably phrased it incorrectly, which is I don't think anybody consciously has that thought. You, wherever you are, whatever your situation, whenever you were born or born into, I think as a child with your sense of self-preservation so strong at that age that you just survey the landscape. Mm-hmm. You don't make a declaration of, I shall take care of myself.
Even to oneself.
You simply start moving that direction. Yeah. And your parents, quietly, you probably asked them for less and less as you got older because you realize Dad's not going to buy me a car. He's not going to lend me money. Mom's not going to buy me a train ticket to go to New York. Or they're not going to do. You in a way let them off the hook from being parents because they trained you not to come around. Mm-hmm. And then you join the military and you're off and running. This is now, so, initially I was thinking, I want to talk to Norman Lear about his success and how he was able to conquer Hollywood and all that, coming from where he came from. But we've taken such a turn for the deep emotional and psychological, which I prefer anyway.
I love it.
So might as well keep going down this road. A lot of people say, you have to forgive. You have to forgive your mother. You have to forgive your father. I don't know how important that is. I think you just have to recognize who they were and not carry around a burden of hate for them, but literally just go, my mom was who my mom was and my dad was who my dad was. But how do you feel?
I think that's forgiveness.
Well, that's an interesting point.
What you've just described is forgiveness. You're not harboring the stuff that made you angry or the stuff that would, that would annoy you. I mean, as we're talking about this, enjoying the conversation, we're talking about narcissistic mothers that behaved abominably.
Right.
But look what we've made of it.
Well, how did it motivate you, and did it motivate you?
It had to have. I mean, here I am telling these stories, listening to you telling the stories, bonding on the fact that we had similar mothers. How enjoyable can a moment get?
Well,
when you think of it that way, they've been a gift.
Well, a gift in the sense that you
a
tell
gift
me.
Today, not then.
Right. But was there a sense for you that if you ever reached a certain level that there would be recognition from your mother? Like, okay, at the beginning you're working as a sort of publicist or you're writing copy for a newspaper. Okay, that's okay. But that's certainly not Television Hall of Fame. It's a far cry from the Television Hall of Fame. But I think there's a part of you, and you tell me, who thinks in a linear fashion, which is, well, she's not recognizing me for this, but I'm just playing AAA ball. But once I make it to the Yankees, then the recognition kicks in.
I can answer the question this way. Ed Simmons and I did the Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis Colgate Comedy Hour. Mm-hmm. So when that first show, it was an explosion. People watched it on other people's television sets.
Right.
Everybody went to somebody's house.
Gathered around.
Because everybody did not have a television set.
Right.
But so it was a giant success. The show was, final credits were rolling when I'm in a pay station off camera on the stage calling my mother for her reaction and my father. Mm-hmm. My mother picks up the phone. And I'm dying to hear her say, because, the roof almost fell in, the laughter, the guys were insanely funny. And I call my mother, and she hears my voice, and she says, "How did the boys like it, dear?" Meaning Dean and Jerry.
Right.
That was her.
Right.
How did they like it? Did I pass muster with my bosses?
Right.
Not a single expression.
Did you find yourself surrounding yourself with people that had the same attitude that your mother had toward you, in a weird way, like an alcoholic daughter of an alcoholic father marrying an alcoholic as an adult? Did you find yourself with an ex-wife or a first wife that didn't particularly seem like a huge fan, or surrounding yourself in general with people that were that way?
I married twice. Before you said the word married, that's where my head was. Yes, I did that a couple of times. Obviously without knowing. But I married women who would carry on the tradition.
Interesting. And in a way, I mean, obviously,
I want to quickly say, I'm not talking about bad people. I'm talking about good people who just happened. It's true, I guess, of my mother too. She was a good woman. What that was all about, the negativity and so forth, I will never be wise enough to know.
And now Alcoa presents Definitely Not a Jew on The Adam Carolla Show. Dateline, Peru, Indiana. A 21-year-old man was intoxicated and with no apparent cause went into his neighbor's yard, slashed his tires, cut down his flagpole, and burned his U.S. flag. Then the man broke into his neighbor's home, opened the freezer, and stole $80 worth of frozen pork. Definitely not a Jew.
Norman Lear in studio. Legendary Norman Lear. I grew up right in your wheelhouse, watching Sanford and Son, The Jeffersons, Good Times, Maude, of course, All in the Family. Amazing work. All in the Family, welcome, by the way, the book. Even this I get to experience. Available now on Amazon, and you know what to do. Click through AdamCarolla.com. Show us a little love. Great to see you. I think I saw you at Phil Rosenthal's house a year or so ago.
Oh, yes, at a film screening.
So we should talk about everything. First off, All in the Family is one of these shows that I reference all the time in the new Hollywood system where you're attempting to do a sitcom and they go, everyone has to be likable. This guy's not likable. And I go, Carol O'Connor was not likable. Archie Bunker was not likable. He was funny as shit, but he wasn't likable. And I literally had an executive go, oh, listen, we know that him and Meathead argued, but we also knew that if Meathead was ever in the hospital, Archie would be the first one by his bedside. And I said, no, he wouldn't. He didn't even like the guy. And I don't know if today's system is driving you nuts or what was different about the old system that you could do something. There wasn't audience testing?
I thought he was a human being, and that automatically included being lovable to some degree and to some people, and some people not. But I always thought of him as lovable in the sense that his daughter could count on him.
But do you I guess what I'm getting at is I come from a very liberal group, and when I was young, we would watch All in the Family, and my super liberal mom would look at him and go, what a buffoon, what a cartoon character, what a clown he is. But she wouldn't be offended by him. She looked at him as a buffoon, and she would laugh with him.
Because there was something lovable about him.
Yeah, but I don't feel like
human being.
I don't feel like we could make that sitcom today because we'd have to make him super likable all the time. He couldn't be that buffoon.
The guys and gals that are doing shows right now, the showrunners, they tell me you couldn't do it today. And they attempt to do some of the things that we did subject-wise, and they can't do it.
Yeah,
so you're right about that.
They would take Carol O'Connor and they would round off the sharp edges and they'd make him just a little more sort of universally friendly, and he'd be just a big blob of oatmeal.
Matt and Trey at South Park wanted to do Archie, and they did him as a little kid.
Right. Yeah, but I'm basically talking about, the big three as it were.
You could do that stuff on Comedy Central or the, cable channels.
So it's weird that we've regressed in a certain way, but you want to talk about shows that hold up. And also, as somebody who came from a poor family that was pretty depressed, I liked watching the Jeffersons and Sanford and Son. It made me feel better about my lot in life versus watching the Partridge Family or the Brady Bunch, which always made me depressed.
Well, you may be articulating something I haven't heard a lot, but there may be a very significant inner truth in that an awful lot of Caucasians watched it because it helped them feel better than they felt they had any right to feel when they weren't watching it.
No, I did. Like, I would see I'd see Good Times, and I would go, all right, they're a little poorer than we are, and they live in a crappier place than we do. We're poor, and we live in a crappier place, but when I would see the Brady Bunch in their big house and their shiny car and everyone intact and happy and together, it would depress me. So in a way, you did a service, and Maude depressed me a little bit too. But then Adrienne Barbeau came down those stairs, and I perked up.
How about Thelma on Good Times?
Oh, yeah. She was pretty good. Yeah, Thelma was pretty good too. But Adrienne Barbeau at 26, coming down those stairs in that tight sweater. Yeah, I woke up in a hurry. Now
I have her. She's in the car at 26 waiting for you.
Yeah.
When this show's over.
That'd be
I
so
brought you
awesome.
An
I had I think I had one of my earliest erotic dreams about Adrienne Barbeau, which was we were at a mall and I tried to grab her boobie and she yelled at me. And then I told her we were in a dream. It didn't matter, and she still yelled at me.
Next story.
Next. Thank you. So you, and this I didn't know, you flew in a B-17 Flying Fortress?
I did.
52 combat missions?
When we went over, we were on a mission basis, and that is some flights we got credit for 2 missions because we were in the area that long. Sometimes we didn't even drop bombs, and we got credit for a mission because we were in the air that long. Then they got on a sortie basis. Mm-hmm. A sortie basis was every time you drop bombs.
Right.
So I was in a plane and dropped bombs 33 times and flew 52 missions. I used the 52 because I'm an American, and that's what we do. Where did you
drop those bombs?
Over Germany.
And that was... The Flying Fortress is closer to
B-17.
the end. B-17 closer to the end of the war. What year would that have been for
1943 and 4.
There wasn't much you could do that was more dangerous than that in the campaign back then, was there?
Well, I suspect if you were in the infantry and you were seeing battle service.
But initially, when they had the, Memphis Belle sort of thing, you can get to 25, and no one got to 25. I mean, they were doing daylight bombings. They didn't have fighter escorts with that kind of range. Right. I don't think the Mustang was around, or at least the Mustang with the drop tanks, and you guys were going out unescorted in the daylight and just getting shredded.
And then the P-51s with the red tails, the Tuskegee guys came along.
Yeah.
And they flew so close to us. And I think about the Tuskegee Airmen, I often think about a trio of, God, now I'm trying to remember the black dancers, the Something Brothers, and they were fabulous.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
I remember flying and thinking, watching the Tuskegee guys dip and dance and flip and come in so close and go over the bomb run with us, which they didn't have to do. They weren't called on to do that, but they did. And it used to remind me of the Something or Other Brothers.
We'll figure it out. They're black, they're brothers, and they tap dance, I think.
Yes.
And
I flew through the air and...
narrowed it down to 250 million guys.
It was like Sabian Glover.
Yeah, it was something like that. They're brothers, amazing tap artists in the 30s or 40s.
Nicholas Brothers. The Nicholas Brothers.
So the idea, and if you guys could imagine this, I mean... when you're flying in Southwest, you hit a little turbulence as you're going into Vegas and your kind of stomach jumps up into your mouth. Imagine flak. I mean, imagine you're flying and people are on the ground trying to shoot you down. And in the air, trying to shoot you down.
The Luftwaffe
in
doing
Messerschmitts.
The same thing in the air, yeah.
And your plane is skinned with aluminum, and when they open up on you, the bullets just go right through it. They go right through the plane. I mean, I don't even know if they would slow down. How that had to be the most nerve-wracking experience in the world.
It's like an afternoon in somebody else's life for me, or a chapter in somebody else's book. It's hard to remember it all. I mean, I remember it clearly, a lot of it, but emotionally, it's really hard to connect.
You must have been so young. How old were you?
I was 20, 21.
It's not the kind of thing I don't think you can get 40-year-olds to do that job. Like,
here's what I've often thought: we live lives end on end and lives within lives. I lived a life in kindergarten. I lived a life in the first grade. I lived a life with my parents. I lived a life in high school, the chemistry class, the debating class. By the time I had to get into that plane, I'd lived so many lives that I don't think any of them were. I didn't think I was going to now live one that was going to end. They never ended. They just one followed the other. So that's the secret, I think. I didn't think, no matter who died, no matter how many planes didn't come back, I couldn't believe it was going to be me.
What was the closest scrape you had, or the time that you saw some planes go down around you or bullets fly?
What comes to mind quickly is my best friend, who was a radio operator on another plane, Jimmy Edwards was his name. And we trained together. And we flew over together. We flew on each other's wing, and the first time we were set to fly, we got up in the morning and we happened to have breakfast. We didn't happen to. We saw to it we had breakfast together, but then we each had to go to the John. This long row of.
And you're flying out of England, right?
No, Foggia, Italy.
You're flying out of Italy?
15th Air Force, out of Foggia, Italy. We met the 8th Air Force flying out of London, out of England, but we flew out of Italy. And the second time, and the flight was canceled. The second time we were due to fly, we already a tiny bit suspicious, or maybe it happened accidentally, but we sat down again after breakfast. And then the third time, it was really a superstition. The fifth time or sixth time, or whatever, when we really took off and flew the very first mission, we were rushing from the commissary to the Johns, to the latrine, and which was just a hole in the ground, but there were like 30 of them. And a lieutenant stopped us and said, "Where are you going?" "We're going to the John. Get on the Jeep. We're going to the flight line." Couldn't talk a minute. We just wanted to just touch down. Jimmy didn't come back. It was our first mission. I think it was Frankfurt, and his plane went down. So that was it happened on the very first mission, and that was the roughest time I remember.
I just, again, the batting average of those guys, especially early on, was so insanely low that, and I don't know if Norman's battalion was like this, but I mean, for many of the guys that did the bombing missions, especially over Europe, they just didn't come back. I mean, they had an acceptable amount of losses, and that acceptable amount was a huge number of planes.
You're saying batting average in terms of just surviving, not in terms of successful mission.
Like I said, just not B-17. I don't think, what was the Memphis Belle? Is that a B-17?
B-17.
They just said, look, if you can make it to 25 successful missions, you can retire. But no one's going to make it to 25, and no one would make it to 25.
I was in a squadron that was where the colonel who led the squadron was a giant hero. He flew a plane called the Swoosh Goose.
The Swoosh Goose or the Swoosh Goose?
Yeah, it was very famous. And his name was Frank Kurtz. And he named his daughter after his plane, and that's Swoosie Kurtz.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. Mrs. Kevin Bacon.
Jesus.
Mrs. Kevin Bacon is right.
Wow. That is incredible. Was your plane? Did your plane have art on it? Did it have a name?
My plane was Umbriago. Do you remember Umbriaga?
No.
You remember Jimmy Durante?
Sure.
Jimmy Durante used to say "Umbriago"
Oh, yeah.
at the end of every show. Mm-hmm. People attach various meanings to it.
It would have been funny if you had dynamite on there. Bizarre precursor.
Prescient.
So
Did you have trouble adjusting when you came back?
I didn't. Interesting enough, my wife, Lynn, her dad fought. He was a photographer, but he was also in the 15th Air Force, flew a bunch of missions, and he didn't get over it. Had a really difficult life following. And for me, it was, as I said, like a page in another book.
like it wasn't your life, or it was your former life, and now
like
you move on.
Like the Chemistry Club. I don't really remember it. I can't believe I was ever a member of a Chemistry Club.
So you come back, and when you return to civilian life, where do you return and what do you start doing?
Well, before the war was over and before I was due to come back, in Foggia, Italy, I stood over a printer. I spoke a little Italian, well enough to be understood by him, and we picked letters out. It was hand-picked letters, his equipment. And I wrote a one-page petition to... I wanted to be a publicist because I had one uncle who flicked me a quarter when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be an uncle. I didn't have another role model. I was a kid of the Depression, but if I could flick a quarter to a nephew, that was it.
Right.
And he was a press agent, so I wanted to be a press agent. I wrote this page. I want to be the guy. I don't want to be the guy everybody's saying, "Who's that?" I want to be the guy behind him that made it possible for him to be the guy they're saying, "Who's that?" Right. Anyway, I had a firm job. He sent it to about 20 publicity houses in New York, Chicago, and L.A. I had one firm offer, and I had an offer for an interview out of all of that. And so I became a press agent. I was a press agent for a little while.
And when did the comedy start kicking in?
It really started there because my job was to write funny things for our clients to say in a variety of columns. There was Walter Winchell and Leonard Lyons and Dorothy Kilgallen. There was a whole bunch of... There were 8 newspapers in New York at the time. As a big comment on our times. 8 newspapers in New York, and each of them had a famous columnist.
Right.
So my job was to write funny things. I got fired for writing funny things, as a matter of fact.
Because they wanted you to sort of stick with the format a little more?
Well, I went over the top, I guess, a couple of times. We had a show called... Have I got time to tell you this?
Yeah.
We had a show called Are You With It? It was a review. And sketches and songs and so forth. And one of the acts in Are You With It was Buster Shaver and his midgets. And his lead midget was named Olive. Mm-hmm. So I wrote and Dorothy Kilgallen printed Buster Shaver and Olive seen shopping Fifth Avenue. He on foot, she on a St. Bernard.
Yeah.
I was fired.
Wow. It's weird how it's weird that you would have been, that was 1950.
49.
So you get fired for that in 1950, and then there'd be a long stretch of time when you wouldn't be fired for that, and now you may be fired for
again,
it.
yeah. Full circle.
We've come full circle in the who's getting fired for saying what department. By the way, speaking of writing, how about Stamps.com? You're going to mail those letters? Stamps.com. Don't go to the post office. You can buy and print official U.S. postage. That's right. U.S., baby. Greatest country in the world. And you can get that postage right out of your own printer. Do it from your own computer. They'll give you a digital scale. You plug it into your computer, put your parcel on there, $55, free postage. There's a little offer code. It's a bonus offer code. Go to Stamps.com before you do anything else. Click the microphone, top of the homepage, type in Adam. Don't do this. We got the holidays coming up. You're going to be sending out cards and gifts and God knows what else. Stamps.com. Enter Adam. So I heard...
You can send the book out
Oh, yeah. You can send Even This I Get to Experience by Norman Lear. The, by the way, website, normanlear.com. I heard that Carol O'Connor was difficult and did not want to go along with a lot of the stuff you were shaping his character into. Is that true?
But yeah, very true.
Was he the kind of person where his politics weren't the same as Archie's politics, or did he say, I don't want to be seen as a buffoon or this kind of guy or possibly racist, or what was his beef?
It was an intellectual thing. I mean, he knew he cared about playing Archie. He loved it. He knew what we were doing. You know, we never received a piece of mail from anybody that said right on Archie that didn't say something like, but you horses' asses, or go back where you fucking came from, or something like that.
Right.
They were always angry letters that still said right on Archie, but they got the point. Carol loved the point. He was an Irish Dublin acting intellectual, and he disagreed with the scripts from an intellectual basis that was altogether wrong often. I also think he was he was carrying a lot of weight, not because of the nature of the character, but the degree of stardom. And
he looked at himself as more of a character actor who wanted to practice his craft, but not have to be on the cover of TV Guide every other week, right? Maybe that was too much pressure for him.
I think it's exactly right. But when it was so fascinating because he would, after a reasonable or unreasonable amount of argument and so forth. Now, by the way, he was often right. I mean, we made a lot of changes that made a better script of a lot of things. But when he was wrong and we held our ground, there would come a time when it was too late. We had to get on with rehearsal or the show wasn't going to be done. And then he would slip mystically into the character.
Right.
And then none of us could write the dialogue. The ideas for the dialogue were, but we couldn't write the actual dialogue as well as they would just pour out of him.
Well, that guy, what he could convey, once you knew the character, when, Edith would say, the new neighbor's coming over to visit, and he'd open the door and there'd be a black guy standing there and you'd just see that look on his face, or just even when somebody sat in his chair instead of him, these moments that you wouldn't think, if you're sitting there describing comedy where you go, well, he has his chair. That's the chair he likes to sit in. And then sometimes a guest would come over, Sammy Davis Jr. would come over, and he would sit in his chair. If someone was describing it to you, you'd go, that sounds all right. That doesn't sound like no one's winning a Peabody for this idea. But when he'd come out of the kitchen and someone would be sitting in his chair, what he could do with that moment, he could make a complete meal out of what wasn't, just a thought. Not even, oh, this is a hysterical idea. It's like, but would he ring it out.
Well, that chair came from my father's red leather chair. It was a red leather chair with an ottoman, from which he controlled the radio, not television. This was radio. But nobody else could touch that dial when he was in the room, but my dad.
Is there, shouldn't everything just be done that way? Like, your dad had his chair. That was the inspiration for Archie and his sort of brown, tattered, his chair wasn't leather. But either way, your dad having a chair is such a great organic thought and idea. Archie should have his chair.
I agree.
As well. And why not just basically approach your creative life that way? Just draw it from your experience and what you know.
That's what we were doing on all the shows. We were all paying a lot of attention to our wives, our kids, our neighbors, and the culture. How were we impacted by what was going on, whether it's the government or the economy or members of our own family? And we would come in gushing with the things that were occurring in our lives. And that's where, my favorite expression for describing that. We were all scraping the barrel of our own experience and sharing it.
When you say that Carol O'Connor was intellectually sort of disapproved of some of the scripts and things, what does that mean exactly?
Well, take a specific show. You like the way his expression when he walked into somebody sitting in his chair and so forth. You can feel that, see that. He was one script called on him to be in an elevator for the entire half hour. The elevator gets stuck. There's a black guy in the elevator, and there is a Hispanic couple in the elevator, and she's pregnant.
Yes.
I wanted to see the baby. I'm not going to have a camera on a berth in an elevator, but I wanted to see the baby born on that floor of the elevator with the camera on Archie's face.
Right.
And he couldn't handle it. And that was clearly the longest argument. We went into rehearsal the latest moment on that particular episode because he couldn't see 5 people in an elevator and a baby born. It even felt, I don't know, it seemed to feel dirty to him, a birth in an elevator. But the camera was on his face, and his face revealing it with the sound of that first, infant cry was as beautiful as anything I've ever seen.